Hello, welcome friends. This is Avinash Gorakshakar, your host for the show today, and welcome to the Finvesh Learning platform. Friends, this platform has been created to help both the small as well as large retail investors to get, some analysis and some value inputs, on companies and sectors. And we introduce many experts here, including myself, and we try to ensure that there is some value which is given out in all of these shows. So today, friends, we have a very interesting guest who will be presenting very value and a very interesting stock opportunity for all of us. But before that, let me introduce this guest. Our guest name is Mr. Vivek Mawani, and I've known Vivek personally for a long time. Vivek has been on the equity market side for more than 25 years, and in these 25 years journey, he has actually covered many roles like equity analyst, a fund manager, an investment advisor, and now he runs his own advisory firm, advising HNI clients, ultra HNI clients, as well as corporates. Vivek is a SEBI registered investment advisor for the last 9 years and has been following the value investing philosophy very strongly. In fact, what is interesting about Vivek is that he has always been known for taking contra bets, which are priced, obviously in favor of investors in terms of the absolute return opportunity, in terms of the selection of companies, where data points are very important. And most importantly, he has been a fundamental investor. He doesn't believe in trading. And most importantly, whenever I talk to him, he is always constantly on the lookout for some value proposition ideas, in the markets, which normally most of the investors don't look at. So what is often neglected is something which he likes, and he obviously is good at doing this. So Vivek, without wasting time, I'll now share the screen with you. And thank you first very much for sharing your valuable time for us on this platform. So Vivek, without any ado, you can take over and please present your company to our participants.
Yeah, thanks Avinash for the introduction and the kind words. So now I'll just move to the presentation. I'll just switch off my camera and do the screen share. Yeah, so the company that we are discussing today is Indian Railway Finance Corporation. Standard disclaimer that this is for education and information purposes, not meant to be a recommendation for any investment or trading, buying, selling. The viewers are requested to consult their financial advisors before taking any decisions. Yeah. So IRFC, Indian Railway Finance Corporation, came out with the IPO recently, listed in January, February this year. So it's been a couple of months that it's been in the markets. It's a SEBI registered, systemically important NBFC owned by the government of India, and it acts through the Ministry of Railways. So IRFC is basically a dedicated market borrowing arm of Indian Railways. So all the investments which are done by Indian Railways in terms of new assets, in terms of infrastructure, the funding is routed through IRFC. The IRFC borrows from the market and lends to Indian Railways. So the primary business of IRFC is three things. It finances the acquisition of rolling stock assets. Rolling stock assets are basically the freight wagons, the passenger coaches, locomotives, etc. For the railways. It does the leasing of infrastructure, railway infrastructure assets and national projects of the government of India. So basically, which is what I was referring to, is the capital investment made by railways in terms of a new infrastructure, new lines added, upgradation of lines is funded by IRFC. IRFC also does lending and funding to other entities under Ministry of Railways like Rail Vikas Nigam, IRCON, etc. The key strengths of IRFC are that it plays a strategic role in financing the growth of Indian Railways. So if I had to participate in the growth of Indian Railways, IRFC is a direct proxy for that. Given that it is a quasi-sovereign entity, their borrowing cost is extremely competitive. In fact, they can borrow at rates less than or equal to what an SBI will borrow at, or at times even lower than SBI. That is because whole business of IRFC is of extremely low risk, and it is a cost plus business model. I mean, we'll come to that, but it's a very low risk business because there is no risk of default, since the lending is itself to Indian Railways, which is basically indirectly lending to Government of India. It has very strong asset liability management because it lends money to Indian Railways on a long-term basis, typically 10, 15-year tenures. It borrows money from the market also for equal tenure. So it unlikely ever has an asset liability mismatch in that sense. The performance so far has been fairly consistent, although it was not listed on the public markets, but the performance is available in the public domain. It has been a fairly consistent performer. So what are the advantages IRFC enjoys? IRFC enjoys certain advantages which are not available to any and every other NBFC or financial institution, which is exemption from certain NBFC norms. And what are those norms that we are talking about? So one is asset classification norms, provisioning norms. Provisioning basically is about providing for bad debts or defaults on the loans, etc. Exposure norms are largely about sectoral exposure, caps, and all of that. Credit concentration norms is again about the total loan book of an NBFC put into multiple buckets or based on credit rating, etc. IRFC also has a serious advantage in terms of it doesn't have to provide for minimum alternate tax. In fact, it doesn't have to pay tax. It is not exempted from tax. It is not required to pay tax because it has a huge depreciation loss on the on its books, which negate any tax that they need to pay. They are also exempted from goods and services tax, GST, which is about the leasing of the assets that they do to the railway and railway entities. Now, these advantages are available only to IRFC and not. And if one were to compare that as a power finance corporation or a rural electric corporation, which also are one thinks that they are similar NBFCs, government arms doing the investment and lending and leasing. The difference is that these advantages are not available to PFC or RAC either, because PFC and RAC, besides lending to sovereign entities, also lend to private sector entities, and hence they do have to adhere to the asset classification, provisioning, exposure norms, etc., which IRFC doesn't have to. So basically, IRFC ends up with much lower cost structure, lower credit costs, etc. Now, the IRFC also operates on a net interest margin which is lower than what other NBFCs work with, but these advantages make up for the lower net interest margin of IRFC, and we'll come to what those net interest margins are. So getting into detail of what IRFC does, what is the business model? So IRFC finances the Indian Railways the acquisition of rolling stock, freight wagons, passenger coaches, locomotives, etc., on a 30-year lease model. So what IRFC does is the acquisition cost is directly paid by IRFC. The asset sits on the books of IRFC. IRFC leases that asset to Indian Railways or recovers EMIs one way or the other. IRFC recovers the full value of the asset plus interest cost over a 30-year period. And the 30-year period is divided into 15-year primary and the 15-year secondary period. After 30 years, the asset is transferred to Indian Railways at a nominal cost. The weighted average cost of IRFC is calculated every year. So every year, IRFC would be borrowing from the market. Older borrowings would be repaid, and that cycle continues. And the weighted average cost of funds of IRFC is calculated every year. IRFC is allowed a net interest margin of 40 basis points, that is 0.4% on its borrowing. So, for example, if IRFC's average cost of borrowing is is about say 5%, it will lend to Indian Railways at 5.4%. And that 40 basis points is the margin that IRFC earns. IRFC also finances the projects of Indian Railways where they are allowed interest margin of 35 basis points. So when we say projects, this projects is about new expansion of infrastructure, investment in investment and upgradation of railway stations, gauge conversion, electrification of lines where electrification is not being done. So all of that is projects, and these are generally of multi-year projects undertaken by railway entities itself. So either it's IRCON or Railway Vikas Nigam, which is doing these projects in terms of execution, and IRFC directly or indirectly funds them. So what is the opportunity in IRFC? IRFC's contribution to capital expenditure of Indian Railways has grown from 19% in financial year 2014-15 to 47%. That is in the year just concluded. So there is a clear trajectory of higher contribution of IRFC in the total capital expenditure of Indian Railways. So the growth story of IRFC hinges on two things. Capital expenditure of Indian Railways itself is likely to grow at about 8 to 10% per year for the next 10 years. And that is clearly laid out in terms of long-term plans of Indian Railways, in terms of what Indian Railways is going to be investing in and what are going to be the budget outlays. So that is fairly clear. The trajectory is fairly clear. There could be little moves from one year to the other in terms of little delays on projects and all that, but this investment is certainly going to happen. The other opportunity, the other flip side of that opportunity is an increasing share of IRFC in the capital expenditure of Indian Railways. So this 47%, which was in financial year 2021, itself could grow to higher amount. So the growth of IRFC would be a couple of percentage points higher than the growth of the investment of Indian Railways itself. Both these factors put together will ensure that about IRFC growth of about 10 to 12% per year on a sustainable basis in the long term. And here what I'm referring to long term is the next 5 to 10 years time period. And this will continue to happen year after year. So there's a brief some financial summary of IRFC. The first column is the financial year 2021 is still estimates because the fourth quarter results are yet to be declared. I have assumed a 10% growth going forward for the subsequent 3 years. Net interest margin growing little higher than the growth in operating income, and correspondingly net profit also growing at roughly about 12% over the next 3-4 years. So what we have is the book value. Here I'm pointing the book value growing from what was 25.5 last year, growing to about 27 and subsequently almost 34 rupees in the next 3 years. The current price, which is about 22 rupees, was what it was a couple of days ago. It's trading at about 0.8, 0.85 times price to book value on historic basis. That is, we're talking of March 21 numbers. The return on equity as a result is also going to grow from about 10.5% last year to about 12.5% in the next 3 years or so. They had an interim dividend of 1.05 rupees after the third quarter result. I'm just assuming there may be a small marginal dividend along with the fourth quarter result. So this is an assumption number, but nevertheless, and dividends likely to grow in line with growth in profits, because they have already a stated dividend policy of a certain proportion of dividend that would be paid out of the net profit. So the growth in dividend will be directly in relation to growth in net profit. So what really is, how does this translate into opportunity for the investors? So valuation of IRFC at 0.8 times price to book is very attractive with little downside risk, or what we call high margin of safety. we've discussed IRFC has already paid interim dividend, so which is almost 5% dividend yield on current market price. Although dividend has already been paid, it is still about 5% dividend yield that we are talking about. Dividends are likely to sustain at about 40% dividend payout of net profits, which is what I just mentioned, which means dividends can also grow at about 12% per annum in line with profit growth. Over the period of 3 to 4 years, return on equity should also improve from about roughly 10.5% to about 12-13% range, which is what we just saw in the previous slide. That increase in return on equity generally results in re-rating or the valuation multiples also rising. And here I'm just conservatively assuming that from about 0.8 times price to book, at least in about 2 to 3 years, the valuation moves to about 1 time book value, and meanwhile the book value itself would grow from about 26-27 rupees today to about 34 rupees. So this table I've just shown what would be the cash flow for the investor, that assuming he buys the stock now, there would be a small final dividends of over the next 2 years, and by 2023 or by 2024, assuming the stock price moves to 1 time book value and 34 rupees would be the book value in 2024, 23 or 24, investors based on the cash flow would have an IRR of almost 22%, 21.93%. So here I have the tax, since dividends are now taxable, and capital gains being long-term capital gains. Post-tax IRR can also be about 19%. 19% IRR over 3-4 years is a fairly attractive proposition to think of in this market, which does seem to be on the tear, I would say, in terms of extremely bullish. But there could be corrections along the way. One is not ruling that out. But IRFC has got significant downside risk protected for an investor, and seems like a safe bet. So this is about IRFC. Any questions that Avinash you may have for our investors? I would be happy to address them.
Yeah, Vivek, thank you very much for a very insightful presentation on IRFC. In fact, Vivek, this definitely looks like a very attractive risk-reward opportunity with a very little, kind of risk variance and a very high margin of safety. Talking about IRFC and this presentation, I have some few questions which I would like to ask.
For sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. The first question is, Vivek, please tell me what is the kind of opportunity for IRFC over the next, say, 3 to 5 years? Because you mentioned in your presentation that IRFC now accounts for almost 47% of the capital expenditure incurred by Indian Railways. So going forward, can we assume that, say, by 23 or FY24 or little later, can this percentage become significant, say around 65 or 70%, and how will it play out positively for IRFC? So your thoughts on this, please.
Yeah, so certainly this percentage of 47%, which was in the last financial year, is going to rise. So maybe in the next 3 to 5 years, this percentage certainly will come to about 60-65% as suggested. Because let's also understand, the way Indian Railways and the way the government capital expenditure works, and I'm going to take a minute on that. So government also last few years, or especially the last 5-7 years, has been relying increasingly on market borrowings for the capital expenditure. So whether it is the power sector, roads, infrastructure, railways, government entities are increasingly incurring the capital expenditure on behalf of Government of India by way of market borrowing. So it's not only restricted to railways. If you look at even the NHAI, National Highways Authority, which does the borrowing for road infrastructure in India, all of them have had an increasing share of total investment undertaken by the government, and government has been routing a lot of the investment via these financing entities, which are there in terms of multiple ministries or multiple departments of the government. So IRFC certainly has that opportunity. It has proved itself that it can borrow large sums of money both from the domestic market as well as from the international market at very competitive rates. And IRFC also has the status from Ministry of Finance to issue tax-free bonds. It's only in India there are only about 5 or 6 entities which are permitted to issue tax-free bonds, and IRFC is one of them. But of course, their borrowing profile from tax-free bonds is less than 15%. The rest of it comes from the domestic borrowing from banks. They do international borrowings also, and they raise normal bonds also, which pay market rate of interest. But even that market rate of interest is, as I mentioned in my opening earlier, they borrow at very competitive rates, which is either at par with what an SBI would borrow at, or even less than SBI in certain cases. So that opportunity, of course, is very large. It's an indirect proxy play on investment in railway infrastructure over the next 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I think Vivek nicely answered. My second question is, Vivek, in terms of pricing power, how do you think IRFC is positioned? Currently the kind of pricing, do you see this pricing to be sustained, or this can improve further going ahead? So will this pricing remain more or less static for the next 4 or 5 years, or do you expect some improvements, going ahead, based on the kind of pricing going forward? So this, method of pricing which is currently followed, your sense is that will this continue or will this actually improve going ahead? Any possibilities here?
See, in terms of pricing, at what rate IRFC borrows from the market, whether they borrow at 5% or 6% or 7%, depending on the interest rate cycle, they certainly will, their borrowing cost certainly will be as close to what a sovereign borrowing would be. I mean, it is probably next only to an SBI or an RBI doing the borrowing. What is important is that 35 and 40 basis points margin that they have in their two businesses, that on the rolling stock, they have 40 basis points over a 30-year period. And as far as projects are concerned, they have 35 basis points. Now that has been decided by Ministry of Railways, which has decided that this is a fair margin for IRFC to basically source the funding on behalf of railways. So in a way, you could say IRFC is basically an intermediary between the railways and the financial markets, because Indian Railways would not be borrowing directly; they borrow it via IRFC and allow IRFC to have a certain margin to run their organization. In that sense, any improvement in net interest margin of this 35 or 40 basis points, of course, is a pleasant surprise for you and me. But it is unlikely that it will fall significantly lower, because any fall, any squeeze on margins, assuming that this 40 basis points were to railways were to say now only 30 basis points would be given to them, well, it would directly affect their return on equity. And if it affects their return on equity, it indirectly affects their cost of borrowing as well. So for railways, to save that 10 basis points is not really meaningful if it leads to higher cost of borrowing for IRFC. In fact, railways should be looking at how to ensure lower cost of borrowing for IRFC rather than squeeze margins. Any upside on margins, improvement in margins, of course, is a positive surprise for us. All of us are going to be happy as investors. But assuming this scenario stays, it is still a very good business to be in.
Yeah. Okay. I think point noted, Vivek. Vivek, another thing which I had read about IRFC, I think you can correct me, is that I had heard that IRFC is also planning to get into some financial structuring services and consultancy services, of course, with Indian Railways. So, how possible you think is this this kind of kind of work which is being planned, because this was also mentioned at the time of the IPO. So, do you think this will add incrementally to IRFC's business, or it will actually be a small line of business? Because this is also something interesting where margins are always going to be slightly better, or maybe it could be different from the core business what IRFC does. So, any thoughts on this, please?
See, I mean, a very valid point. IRFC, of course, over the last 25 years has built significant capabilities in financial structuring. in terms of fundraising, in terms of and create a significant market position for itself. It certainly can do consultancy and advisory business within the financing space in the railways infrastructure domain. Now that even private players are going to be coming into the railway, running of trains and running stations, and I mean basically coming into doing a lot of the activities which currently railways does in-house, which over the next couple of years would be given out to private operators. So IRFC certainly has an opportunity to consult on the financial aspects as far as those lines of business are concerned. Consulting is always a high margin business, but one has got to see that top line of IRFC earns of about maybe 11,000 crores per year. Consultancy maybe 30-40 crores or 50 crores per year opportunity, even if it gives you 90% profit margins. I mean, your incremental profit is still less than 5%. It's not even 5% of the total profits that the organization would make. So, although it's going to be a lucrative opportunity, size of the opportunity is too small for the core business to really be move the needle in terms of earnings here or
there. Yeah, I think well explained, Vivek. Vivek, one more question which I would like to ask you is that, considering the fact that IRFC's business model is very strong and stable, and there are hardly any possibilities of any non-performing assets, like other NBFCs or the banks. Now, tell me one thing, in your assessment, can IRFC actually be looked upon as a replacement for an investor who's wanting to put money in fixed deposits? Like, typically fixed deposits offer a very low yield. So can one consider that, instead of investing in fixed deposits, can one either look at investing in IRFC or maybe, even think of switching some part of your fixed deposits to a stock like IRFC, which could offer very good returns over the longer term? So any thoughts on this?
Yeah, certainly. See, this can be a replacement for fixed deposits with an option value. And let me explain that. Your fixed deposits give you 5-6% rate of interest, fully taxable. Here, your dividend is 5-6% dividend yield on your current market price, which is also fully taxable. So whether you get 6% yield on your dividend or your 6% yield on a fixed deposit, you are even on both, because both are fully taxable. But what IRFC also gives you is the growth opportunity, which a fixed deposit will not give you. So your fixed deposit, the principal amount will still remain what it is. Of course, compounding for interest reinvested. But at least in case of IRFC, as we mentioned, there is an opportunity for growth. Your book value, which is 26-27 rupees today, will be 34-35 rupees for 3-4 years down the line. Okay, your fixed deposit is not going to grow at that rate in terms of the value. And in case of IRFC, which is trading a discount of book value, at some point of time will at least come back to price to book value. I'm not saying like other NBFCs like Bajaj Finance or a Mahindra Finance or a Shriram Transport Finance, which trade at anywhere from 3 times price to book value to 6 times price to book value. IRFC is never going to be in that league. IRFC probably in the best case scenario, maybe between 1 to 1.2 times price to book, similar to what your PSU banks are. So in that sense, this is better than a PSU bank also, because there are no NPAs. PSU banks are saddled with NPAs. So there's no business risk on earnings also. So in that sense, yes, this can be a replacement for our fixed income investors as well, with an option value of growth.
Okay, I think Vivek nicely explained. Now, my last question, Vivek, to you is that looking at IRFC, what is your assessment that whether IRFC is really a value opportunity or a growth opportunity in an investment kind of sense, and how should investors actually play this opportunity? Like you mentioned the highlights and the advantages which IRFC enjoys, but if you can throw some light on these areas and help investors take a decision.
Yeah, so IRFC certainly is a value opportunity. Value opportunity with moderate growth, because we are not looking at very aggressive growth in top line or bottom line. We are assuming only 10-12% growth scenario, which I think is very modest in that sense. Any upside in growth is, I would say, a bonus, but I'm not factoring that in at this point of time. It certainly is a value stock with very little downside risk, high margin of safety, which may give you capital appreciation over the long term. Over the next 3 to 5 years, you may have capital appreciation, but while you wait for the capital appreciation, your 5-6% dividend yield will keep coming every year. And that is where I would say that it may be a long wait for the value to get realized or recognized by the markets. But while you wait for that value to be recognized, you are still paid for your cost of holding. I mean, your cost of waiting, which is in form of dividend yield of 5-6%.
Okay, I think well explained, Vivek. I think thank you very much for the time today shared by you. In fact, we like that Vivek. In future, also you share this platform with us and share your ideas with all our participants. Friends, before we close, a small request to all of you. Our Finvesh app is available on Google Play. It is one of those apps where you not only get live corporate news, but a lot of inputs on corporate restructuring, portfolio restructuring, as well as some pertinent inputs like question answers which are not answered by most of the experts are available by the panel of financial experts on the Finvish app. So please download this app and please spread the word with your friends and colleagues. That will go a long way in making this app very popular with everybody. And in conclusion, thank you very much for a patient listening for all the participants also. Vivek, in conclusion, thank you very much.
Thank
And
you.
let's meet again in future. And thank you for your time today. Thank you.
Oh, sure. I look forward to a lot more interactions of this with a lot new ideas in these markets. Thank you.
Thank you.